So, think about the last time you stepped onto an airplane. You probably didn't pause at the door to double-check the engineering, right? You just trusted it. For decades, one single name in commercial aviation commanded that kind of absolute, unquestioning trust: Boeing. Millions of passengers flew on their planes every single day. Airlines trusted the engineering, pilots trusted the tech, and we, the passengers, trusted the brand. For generations, the name Boeing was literally synonymous with innovation, quality, and above all else, safety. They weren't just slapping metal together, they were connecting the world. But as we're going to unpack in this explainer, even the most legendary empires can be shaken to their very core.
Which really brings us to the question that completely stunned the globe. How on earth did aviation's most trusted giant stumble into its darkest crisis? I mean, within just a few months, we saw two devastating aviation disasters involving the exact same, brand new aircraft model. Immediate investigations were launched, whole fleets were grounded worldwide, and suddenly everyday travelers were genuinely afraid to fly. And this wasn't just a failure of engineering. It was a massive failure of leadership, management, and corporate priorities. So to really understand how this happened, we need to rewind the clock.
Part 1. Building an Aviation Empire.
To grasp the sheer scale of this crisis, you have to look at the legacy they had built. Starting way back in 1916, when William E. Boeing founded the company in Seattle, he had a pretty simple vision: just build better airplanes. And they did exactly that. Over the decades, they methodically engineered planes that basically defined modern travel. The 707 kicked off the jet age in the 50s. The 727 and 737 became the absolute go-to planes for short trips. And then, the 70s brought us the iconic 747, the queen of the skies, which totally revolutionized how we travel long distances.
But here's the crucial thing about those early days. Safety wasn't just a cool feature or a marketing buzzword. It was the literal foundation of the company. Every single new aircraft went through years of grueling research, intense testing, and really tight collaboration with global regulators. They built an unbreakable level of trust over generations, making Boeing one of the most respected companies on Earth.
Part 2. The Airbus rivalry.
Of course, maintaining that kind of global dominance, it's incredibly tough, especially when a massive challenger enters the ring. By the early 2000s, commercial aviation was essentially this super high-stakes two-horse race. In one corner, you had Boeing, the American heavyweight with decades of historical dominance. In the other, Airbus, this fast-growing European upstart that was heavily investing in super-modern, highly efficient designs. And Airbus was hungry. They were promising airlines lower operating costs, which means cheaper tickets for us, so every single aircraft order turned into this billion-dollar tug-of-war. Then, in 2010, the catalyst for this whole crisis drops. Airbus rolls out the A320neo. This was basically an upgraded version of their standard plane, but with brand new, highly fuel-efficient engines. And since fuel is arguably an airline's biggest expense, the industry went wild for it. Orders just started flooding in. Airbus was snatching up massive market share, and Boeing, well, they were suddenly backed into a corner, bleeding customers fast.
So Boeing is staring down this monumental corporate dilemma. Option 1, bite the bullet, spend a decade and billions of dollars designing an entirely new airplane from scratch. That means years of testing and certification. Or option 2, quickly upgrade their trusted existing 737 platform to give airlines an immediate alternative to Airbus. The problem was, time was ticking. Airbus was already cashing checks. So Boeing went with option 2.
Part 3. Developing the 737 MAX.
But choosing the fast route set off this crazy engineering domino effect. To match Airbus's fuel efficiency, Boeing had to use larger modern engines. But here's the catch. The classic 737 sits really low to the ground. You literally couldn't just swap the engines out, they wouldn't fit under the wings. So engineers had to mount these big new engines higher up and much farther forward. It sounds like a minor tweak, but in aviation, it's huge. It totally altered the plane's aerodynamics, shifting the center of gravity and creating a risk where the nose of the plane could actually pitch upward during certain maneuvers. Now, instead of completely redesigning the hardware to fix this aerodynamic issue, Boeing turned to software. They created a system called MCAS, or the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. Basically, it was a background software program designed to automatically push the nose of the plane back down if it sensed it pitching up too high. The whole point was to make this radically altered 737 MAX feel and fly exactly like the older 737s that pilots already knew. And from a sales perspective, this was an absolute masterstroke. Faster development, lower operating costs, and the holy grail for airlines, minimal pilot retraining.
An airline could buy this shiny, efficient new jet and put their current 737 pilots right into the cockpit without sending them to expensive simulator training. Investors loved it, airlines bought it by the hundreds, and the MAX became a record breaker for Boeing. But, as we all know, software is only as good as the data it receives.
Part 4. Tragedies and Investigations.
In October 2018, the unthinkable happened. Lion Air Flight 610 crashed just minutes after takeoff from Jakarta, tragically killing all 189 people on board. At first, some thought it might just be a tragic, isolated incident. But then, a mere 5 months later, in March 2019, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 went down shortly after leaving Addis Ababa, claiming another 190 lives. In less than half a year, 379 lives were lost in 2 brand-new aircraft under terrifyingly similar conditions. Global aviation authorities stepped in and grounded the entire MAX fleet worldwide.
When investigators finally got their hands on the black box data, what they uncovered was deeply, deeply disturbing. They found that erroneous data from a single faulty external sensor was enough to trigger MCAS. The software effectively hijacked the plane, aggressively forcing the nose down while pilots fought desperately to pull it back up. And making matters infinitely worse, flight crews hadn't even been properly trained that MCAS existed, let alone how to turn it off. It was a perfect storm of technical flaws, completely inadequate training, and a rushed regulatory process.
Part 5. The Business Fallout.
Tens of billions of dollars. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the staggering financial blow Boeing took almost overnight. We're talking halted production lines, billions paid out to furious airlines to compensate for their grounded fleets, canceled orders left and right, and a mountain of legal costs. Boeing went from being the absolute titan of American industry to a company fighting for its very survival. And the bleed wasn't just financial. The broader corporate impact shook the entire aerospace world. The global grounding meant factories went dark, thousands of workers and smaller suppliers were suddenly facing massive job insecurity. Boeing's market value absolutely tanked, and the crisis eventually forced out top senior executives, including the CEO at the time, Dennis Muilenburg. A century's worth of hard-earned trust was basically shattered in an instant.
Part 6. Lessons for the Future. So, how do you even begin to recover from something like this? Well, a software patch wasn't going to cut it. Boeing had to essentially rebuild the aircraft safety architecture. They completely redesigned MCAS, adding mandatory, redundant safeguards. They totally overhauled their manuals to require extensive, rigorous pilot training in actual simulators. They had to submit to incredibly strict independent reviews by regulators across the globe before a single MAX was allowed back in the sky. And above all, they had to start clawing back transparency with airlines and the flying public.
Which brings us to the absolute core takeaway of this explainer. It's summed up perfectly right here. Trust takes generations to build, but only moments to lose. This whole crisis is so much bigger than just an aviation story. It's a stark, timeless lesson about corporate responsibility and what happens when safety is compromised. It's a brutal reminder that past success doesn't guarantee future safety and that the pressure to beat the competition can never outweigh human lives.
So I want to leave you with a question to chew on, because this applies to almost every industry out there. In the relentless pursuit of market dominance, how can modern businesses actually ensure that safety is never compromised for the sake of speed? Boeing is obviously still a massive player in global aerospace today, but their biggest ongoing challenge isn't just engineering planes anymore, it's rebuilding our confidence, one safe flight at a time. It just goes to show that behind every massive corporate disaster, there's a vital lesson we literally can't afford to ignore.
If you like this video, like, share, and subscribe to Wealth Decoded for more of our business, finance, and tech explainers. Turn on the bell to get notified when a new video is uploaded. Thank you for watching, and we will see you all in the next one.